Okay, is the sound clear? Everybody can hear me, inshallah?
Yeah.
All right, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It's a real pleasure and honor to be, presenting my first presentation to my Muslim brothers and sisters from the Sudan. And I'm very honored to have this opportunity. And inshallah, just trying to share some information pertains to a non-profit organization in terms of the, best practices. And one of the main key things is very governance, And as we speak right now, our country, I say our country because even though I'm not from Sudan, I feel like I'm part of your community, so it's going through a lot of crisis, and it's an opportunity for SAMA to be a leading organization, not only currently, but in the future. So I'm very optimistic and hopeful that this information could be taken, to the next level, inshallah. Having said that, today's agenda, I want to give you something about my background in the nonprofit organization. Then we're going to talk about the main topic, which is governance, what it is, because it means to different people, different meanings. And then we'll follow that by fiduciary responsibility of the board. And this is where a lot of nonprofit organizations, specifically our Muslim brethren in the faith, they kind of fail or tend to kind of overlook this important duty. And then after that, we'll talk about what are the documents that we need to govern properly, and then barriers to effective governance. And finally, what are the best practices that we can deduce from this presentation and try to apply it to our daily, tasks on running a nonprofit organization like SAMA. Of course, I have been in the nonprofit organization, for 3 decades right now. And of course, I was a founding member of HARA, which stands for Horn of Africa Relief Aid. And I was in Washington, D.C. myself for 2.5 years, living in Falls Church, closer to, the, politics there in, Washington, D.C. and learned a lot, quite a lot. And I don't know if you guys know the AMC, the American Muslim Council, which was led by Akhwana Abdurrahman Al-Amoudi. So we really, these are the pioneers and the giants of Muslims in America who have given up a lot, and hopefully we'll learn from them, and hopefully we'll share that information at a later time with you. And of course, I have held various board of directors position in a Muslim and non-Muslim organizations. Recently, during the COVID epidemic, I was a board member of the council, Collin County Charitable Clinics here in Plano, Texas. So this is really my background in terms of nonprofit. Of course, full-time, I'm a chiropractic physician in practice with the Joint Corporation here in Dallas, Texas, and I'm a clinic director here in Murphy city of Murphy. Okay, having said that, let me just ask a quick question. I am assuming that almost everybody is either part of SAMA board or volunteering to SAMA, right? If I ask you, let's say from 1 to 5, what star would you give SAMA at this time? 1 star, 2 star, 3 star, or 4, whatever 5 star? I just want to see show of hands, and then how do you base that? Hopefully we will talk about it. Again, I want it to be a little bit interactive. I don't want you to be, just listening to me and, boring lecture,
Yeah. I think I'll give it a 5. This is like my first time participating, and I heard of SAMA a little over a year ago, but this is my first time kind of participating into like meetings and all of that. But I will give it a 5 so far. What I learned, what the organization is doing, at least at home in Sudan, given the current situation that is going on within our country.
Perfect. That's good. Anybody else? That's a good, Dr. Mustafa. Appreciate your feedback. Anybody else? And then, again, there's no right or wrong question. We just want to see a feedback and see how we are doing, because we just want to go from there. Dr. Salah, why don't you give us your feedback, because you seem to be the pioneer and.
Yeah, so I should be the last person to ask, right?
Okay, all right, no problem, because I also have. Okay, go ahead. So you moderate it, inshallah.
So I think it's better to suggest, like, somebody who's looking from outside, because I think that's a better perspective. Suggest that question to go to Adil, Hiba, and Khalid. I think they're
okay.
To answer that.
Okay, I'll jump first. Personally, I think I give them the highest rank. The reason why, because I was pretty much close to the founders and the peoples are involved, and since they established it, Dr. Bushra, Dr. Shami, Muhammad Al-Sid, and Salah Hussein, all these people, and brother also Aladdin Bushra, a lot of people, the founders. So I'm pretty much familiar with their accomplishments. And they did a lot. I can't conclude everything they did, but I think I give them the highest rank.
Oh, that's good. Next. One more feedback.
Yeah, so this is Khalid Osman. I want to say that, and I'm kind of new to the organization from an inside perspective, but I think I will give them highest ranking. Basically, you know, the way I got engaged to the organization was around really, I feel like a self-calling. So I've been working with the community in so many aspects. But what I like is there is a website that has, I would say, clear objective. It tells the story about the organization. It tells the accomplishment. So from that point, I'll give them a very high ranking, which is, to me, is looking at the organization from an outside perspective without really knowing what goes inside.
Good. Very good objective, Dr. Khalid. Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much. All right, Dr. Salah, why don't you give us, well, if you want to pass it, that's okay. Anybody else before you go further?
I can go. I think I'll probably rate it as 4, honestly, and the only reason I'm not.
Who is this, Muhammad?
Muhammad Al-Hassan, Muhammad Jafar.
Okay.
The only reason I'm not giving 5 is I always think there is a lot of room for improvement for all of us. But knowing Sama for years and years, I think really what they have achieved so far is really great. Alhamdulillah. I think with all the difficulties, with all the hardships, and it's really hard to do things between US and Sudan. But the orchestra that has been run by really a lot of our friends and brothers in Sama, it's just amazing, subhanAllah. And I really I can't I can say a lot about what they have achieved. I mean, we all have all the data about what happened during the last 5-10 years. But again, I'm not giving 5 because I only think that, you know, there's always something that we can do more.
Very good. Okay. Well, at least this gives us a little, you know, feeling, you know, how people feel about Sam, which is great. You know, by the way, Dr. Salah, you should be very proud of whatever everybody says. But again, to accomplish, you know, again, we're looking at the organization from inside out, not outside in, you know. And of course, it's very difficult at this time for any organization to have a 5-star. You may say you're a 5-star, but it takes a lot of work, a lot of commitment from the board, you know, and that's what we're trying to hone in tonight, or hopefully shed some light. But again, it's not impossible, but at the same time, it's not easy, you know. And of course, in this day and age, people like to have information. They have to have correct information at the right time. All right, having said that, so let's go back to what we are talking about. There is a guidebook. Hopefully, I will share with you, inshallah. I'll give a copy to Dr. Salah, and hopefully you share. There are over 114 best practices. You don't have to apply all of them, or some of them you may be applying them right now as we speak. But it's good to know what they are, you know. So basically, this is the stuff that I brought at the beginning to show you. So there's 9 guiding principles that you have to live with, 32 core elements, and then 114 best practices. You know, this is done by professionals who are attorneys and others together in one of the states. I couldn't recall. Probably it's I think South Carolina, I believe. But anyhow, so I just want you to listen, hopefully, and hopefully, you know, you will get some important points. Going to our topic again. So in order to talk about guiding principles and best practices, those things, they just don't happen in a vacuum. They happen, you know, when you do something, then you have to have a practice, you know, that you do all the time, the skill set, and the guiding principles, you know. So having said that, the number one key in any organization if to be successful, you can take the Red Cross or you can take the US government, it doesn't matter. The number one key is governance. And this is where, unfortunately, most of our African countries fail because there is no transparency, there is no accountability. I mean, you can go on and on, but we're going to lose this. So that's the number one. The second thing is strategic direction and partnership of the organization, because if you don't have a map, if you don't have a blueprint, and then of course a GPS to where to go, you will just be lost. And then the third point is leadership, organizational culture. This is straightforward because organization also, they don't happen in a vacuum. People make the organization. Microsoft is made of people. Amazon is made of people, So these people are, when you see the execution of whatever mission and vision that they have, it's been done by people. It's not in a vacuum. Of course, next one is communication, advocacy, very, very important. And then, of course, legal accountability, transparency. So these are the stuff that, in order to be able to, get to the governance, to understand each one. Of course, today we're going to only talk about the first one. Of course, financial management, stewardship is very, very important. Fundraising, as well as operations and planning. Okay, so these are the 8 bullets, but of course, each one will have a separate section, but today we're going to address the first one, which is governance. And I'm pretty sure if I ask governance, what it is, and, okay, look like it's repeating itself. There we go. All right. So the governance difference, why is it important? It's very, very important because, we have to understand in the context of, since we are here in the United States, there are over 1.6 million nonprofit organizations, which SAMA is one of them. Can you imagine 1.6 million? That's a lot of organization. And of course, they provide a vital role in providing quality, improving the quality of life in our communities. In this case, will be our people in Sudan. All right. A nonprofit board, which really, is done most of the leadership and governance, they have to understand and fulfill their governance responsibility to ensure that they have the resources, they have the leadership, and then oversight necessary to fulfill the mission of the organization. And this is not going to only be, by itself, but again, in order to have a highly effective organization with greatest, mission impact, require high performance boards. So again, like I said, the boards are the engine of any organization. So 1.6 million, a lot of organizations to monitor. And then why is it more important than ever? Because the world around us has changed dramatically right now with the internet, technology, and of course, all the rules and regulations also have changed in the last 3 decades, and then also business is not as usual, as we spoke, and the boards need to be more flexible. They have to be strategic. You can't just do business as usual. And at the same time, it has been, recently that it's tough time because there's a lot of competition within the nonprofit organization, locally as well as internationally, and who's going to do what and who has most expertise. And of course, resources are very, very important. Having said that, I want to bring this, a little bit more, practical so you can understand, I just did a Google, search, for Texas, the state that I'm residing right now. In this state, there's over 140 nonprofit organizations, and this nonprofit, they employ almost 1 million people, 911,000 people. That's a lot of people. And then they earn more than $147 billion. That's a lot of money, And then also they have a lot of almost 400 billion assets. So in order for this organization, to be able, somebody has to monitor. That's why the DA, the district attorney, and part of the Secretary of State, they have a specific, section of nonprofit in order to monitor if they're doing right or not, or not right. So it shows you a lot of people, they don't see this in a complex world that we live. They only think of themselves, and unfortunately, and also hopefully we'll share, specifically the Muslim organization who are in the United States, only few of them have the professionalism and understanding of what we're talking about right here. They go through the mechanism, they provide the service, but in terms of governance, there's some, thing that does not achieve, So how does this relate to, nonprofit? Very simple, So the guiding principle should be that in order to excel, to achieve the mission of organization, the board provides high-level vision, leadership, and oversight, and it also ensures adequate resources and sound stewardship of the assets of the organization becomes the ground principle. Dr. Salah, I think somebody wants to be admitted. Can you? Okay, good. All right, so let's unpack the governance box and see what is it. Because if I ask what's governance, everybody has different definitions or different understanding, and this is the stuff that I said we're going to be talking about. So let's go ahead and do that. So governance, what is governance? Basically, it's the process. It's not only one thing, set of several things. Number one is setting goals. Number two is defining expectations. And number three is allocating resources. And finally is verifying performance. This is what governance is. All this seems so easy, but again, if you look, who's going to set the goals? The board is going to set the goals. That's what we're talking about, the mission and the vision, short-term goals, long-term goals. Expectations of who? Expectations of each individual member. And I can tell you, being the board member, I am for sure you may have, let's say, 10 board members in an organization. There will be one or two who are underperforming for whatever reason. So what do you do with those people? If you have defined the expectations ahead of time, this will not have happened. And if it does happen, how do you take care of it? That's governance. So all of this has to be, verified. And of course, performance has to be verified. It's not just you take a position in a board and that's it. A year goes, 6 months goes, unfortunately. So therefore, for an effective governance is very, very integral to the success of any organization, but specifically to a nonprofit organization. All right, here's a picture. So as an organization, I'm pretty sure there's board of directors and committees of SAMA, there's policies and procedures. This is the outer circle, if you can see it. Can you see my arrow? Can you guys see my arrow? Hello?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, good. So we have the big, so I just want you to go with me. So we have here the board and the committees and the policy and procedures, of course, monitoring, internal control, transparency. This is the outer, you can say, look at it like a 5, concrete, things that the organization is sitting. But again, the most important is in the center. But of course, organization cannot exist without having the vision, the mission, strategy, and objectives, and a smart goal, specific, measurable at a specific time. But the most important of all of this, which is the engine, is the governance. If you cannot govern, all of this means nothing, And that's what I was saying earlier about when they write all the stuff, in their websites. But when you come to really see, what they are doing, if there's any transparency, or any checks and balances, sometimes you wonder how they are doing. And I really can share this, with you, inshallah, at a later time. Yeah. All right. So again, as a nonprofit board, governance is a combination of systems, guides, and processes to make decision and hold decision makers accountable. This is very, very important. All right. When the people are accountable, they know they will perform. But if they're not accountable, and then of course you have to have also a process of accountability. Who's going to do what? So if I'm a president, what's my role? And who's going to hold me accountable? If I'm the executive director, what's my role? Who's going to hold me accountable? So this is part of the governance within the realm of nonprofit organization. All right, this takes us to, all right, governance has two very important elements. The first is what is called technical, and then the second one is operational. The technical part is basically the legal. And this is really what I really want to highlight a little bit. If I'm going to recruit a board member to any organization, let's say for SAMA, if I tell them, you're going to be legally responsible for this organization, and I want you to do this, they're going to think, twice before they accept the position. But it's so good to know if somebody has what it takes, if they understand the legal aspect, and if they're basically willing to do the, do the work, because the legal part is very, very important. That's why, when you register your board of directors. This is what they're going to do. Unfortunately, things tend to be loose, and there's no checks and balances, and that becomes really not clearly murky in that process. The second, of course, and this is between the group of people and the corporation. So SAMA has, for example, if you're going to use SAMA as a, in this case, a board of directors. So the board of directors are legally responsible for the corporation, okay? And of course, and then also when they deal with other organizations, it could be local or could be, or international. The second is operational, which is a functional relationship between the organization itself and then the group of people. In this case, it will be your donors, your committee members, volunteers, things like that. So there's two components, again, technical and operational. So once those two are, going hand in hand, then the organization will excel and achieve its given mission. The second part is, so what are the responsibilities of the board, and then what are the standards of conduct? And this is the key element. This is what I call, I'm pretty sure most of you will understand, that this is the myelin sheath of any organization. Myelin sheath, it's in the neurons that covers for transmission of, senses and so forth, Therefore, because this is intricate, so what are the standard of conduct? So the board, they have to understand what it is, and they are responsible for the operation for which it serves. All right. Having said that, and this is what we call the fiduciary. This is a legal term that means that the board is responsible, for their fiduciary duties. The fiduciary duties has three key components. The first one is, we call them the 3Ds, if to remember them easily as an acronym. And every time I attended, seminars, through the years, local or out of state, all the people, especially some attorneys who represent, presenting about cases, for nonprofit, how they can be, they always mention this. Some of them in great detail, some of them was a little bit, but all of them, they mention the, fiduciary duties of the organization. So the first D is duty of care. That means you, as a board member, should fulfill your role to the best of your ability. A prudent person, an adult, 18 years and above, adult, American, US citizen, within sound mind. That means you're going to be doing your best to, care for the organization that you're representing. So that means you have to be proactive, not reactive. So when they say there is a meeting at 6 o'clock, like today, everybody shows up on time. You have to be there, 5:58. That's what it is. So you care about the organization. The second duty is duty of loyalty. You have to be loyal to the organization, not to the president, not to an individual, not to a group of people. No, to the organization. So you are loyal to the organization. And if anything comes up when you make decisions, and when you make any, thing pertains to the organization, you're going to make a decision based your loyalty to that corporation, not to individual. Therefore, all activities will be done in the best interest of the organization, not the interest of individual board member. Finally, the duty of obedience. It means that you have to follow the law, the law, whatever the law is. And most of the time, the nonprofit law in almost 50 states are similar. In fact, they are the same, with minor differences, but then this means that the board should follow organizational rule as defined in the nonprofit governance document that you have. So basically, again, duty of care, duty of loyalty, duty of obedience. And this really, I cannot emphasize. Once people understand they have this fiduciary duties, then they will be able to perform better, and then the organization will move forward with good results. All right. And then, of course, in addition to the fiduciary duties as a governing body, and then the board has also responsibility to support the management. In this case, if you have a board of directors, the staff, and also volunteers as well. And then to ensure operations run smooth and in accordance with the law, which the law of the United States. All right. So these are the 10 basic responsibilities. This is from the nonprofit board, and everybody uses this as a guideline. There's 10 of them. Hopefully you can read them. But I would like to emphasize on number 1, 4, 8, and 9, because this is where most of the nonprofit organizations kind of not come to power. The first one is, of course, it's to establish mission and purpose. And again, everybody has a mission and a purpose, but unfortunately, they don't really follow up to accomplish that mission. They say that, but in reality, when you come to find out, they're not doing the mission. For example, I'll give you a good example. Recently, one of the organizations, Muslim organization, was formed to help the people of Yemen. As you already know, Yemen being in war and so forth. And then the CEO, Chief Executive Officer of the organization, also is one of the founding member. He decided to do fundraising for, Turkey. So it's like, and when I heard this, I said, and I tried to talk to him, he goes, no, we're going to collect. Of course, you can collect, anybody can collect any money. But if your mission and purpose is different, why do you want to create, why do you want to open kind of worms, Anyhow, they went ahead and do that. But again, it shows you how the people are not in connection with their mission and purpose. So again, this is a very simple example. Number 4 is policies ensure effective planning. And also planning comes a very, very important role for any organization to, and we're talking about short-term plan and a long-term plan, and then policies. And the policies also, they should be reviewed and updated regularly, sometimes within a year, maybe 2 years or whatever, and based on your needs. So these are very important. And then of course, number 8, which you can see here, we'll be talking about governance. You have to be able to build a competent board, competent in terms of, experience, expertise, and who can, deliver, not just number. You don't want warm bodies, but you need people who have the intellect, the expertise, the experience, and the commitment to achieve what you're trying to do. Finally, ensure legal and ethical integrity. Another organization that also I'm supporting or helping as an advisory board. Recently, they came to know that they want to get funding. Somebody referred them. They said they're going to get money from the Tate brothers. You guys know the Tate brothers right now, correct? Who are in jail right now. And this is a very, very, I told them, listen, stay away from this stuff, You may get 100 million, 200. Why do you want to put yourself in that situation, I said, no, don't go forward, I haven't heard what the board's result or decision was. They were meeting, and this happened like a couple of weeks ago. So anyway, again, making sure the legal, ethical integrity is very, very clear in the organization. So basically, this is something for you to think and ponder. Hopefully, get to what you want. So in a nutshell, then, of course, the board of directors are a team of individuals working towards a mission. Okay, it's not just holding seats or warm bodies, but working together and then achieving the mission of the board of the organization. Sorry. All right, this brings us to number 4. And then what are the documents that, and why do we need them? And one of the most neglected documents are the bylaws. Most of the board, number 1, either they haven't read it. If they read it, they only read it once, or they scan through it. No, every board member, they have to know the bylaws from cover to cover, from page 1 to page 15, whatever page may be, okay? Because the reason is because bylaws are written rules. This is the rules that you're going to run the organization. If you don't know what the rules are, how are you going to hold each other accountable? All right, all right. And also, bylaws gives you the organizational structure. Who is the president and what his role? Who is the vice president? What is his role? Who is the secretary? And so forth, Therefore, again, this is the hierarchical of the structure of the board. And then, of course, you have some rights and also responsibility. We talk about responsibilities. Also, you have some rights. How do you know your rights? You go to the bylaws. So bylaws is not just a document that you write and then you post in your website and then you don't check it until something happened. No, this is, and most attorneys that have came, they always say that you have to review it regularly. Maybe every once a year, and then of course try to revise it and update it, as needed, that fits your need. And at the same time, in other words, also the bylaws are guide to the board. This is what guide in order to do the business, within the organization and outside to the constituents, and then, all right. So, and also bylaws also helps you. It's a protection against any legal challenge. So if you know this, of course, you don't have to have an attorney. Of course, you can have an attorney to guide you, but at the same time, the board as a group, as a unit, they need to know about the bylaws. They need to know the bylaws are updated. They need to know everything. So that way, because this is your document that will help you to do your fiduciary duties. And finally, like I said, I cannot overemphasize, it's a legal document. Even though when you apply for incorporation, you don't have to have your bylaws. The IRS assume that you have one, and then when they need, they're going to ask you if you have any problem. But again, it's a legal document, so it's a legal document that may be taken seriously and going through it. Here, let's have shed some light of why governance matters. Of course, corporate scandal has been very rampant in recent years. If you guys, most of you live here in the 20s, 2000s, 1986 until 2002, something like that. I remember Enron, one of the big giant, energy organization. This is failure of governance, Lehman Brothers, and so forth. So let's take Enron very quickly. Even though this is a public health organization, this is an energy trading utility company based in Houston, Texas, and that they perpetrated one of the biggest accounting frauds in history. And then the executives, which is the CEO, the president, they use fraudulent account practice to inflate their revenue and then hide debts in their subsidies. Of course, there's so many people involved in this case, and right now even the Enron case is being taught in all business dealing as well as nonprofits. They use it as an example. Here we have Kenneth Lay on the left of the screen and Jeffrey Skilling. So Kenneth was the founder and president of Enron, and he brought Jeffrey Skilling. So this guy, he didn't know anything about Enron. So basically he recruited him. And by the way, Skilling is a graduate of Harvard. All right. So these are people who are really American, white collar professionals, and they know the rules, but they violate them. Anyhow, to make a long story short, Kenneth Lay, passed on the Enron, dynasty to Jeffrey as a CEO. And then after 4 months, he's been in the helm of leading Enron. Of course, went bankrupt. Of course, the federal government started looking at their dealing. Sorry, what's going on here? All right. Make a long story short, so this is the biggest fraud, and of course, Jeffrey Skilling was, sentenced for 24 years for prison and paid over $600-something million. Of course, the organization does not exist right now, but again, it shows you how intricate it is. And again, we can learn from this, even though this does not apply to nonprofit. After this happened in early 2002, the U.S. Congress passed an American Competitiveness and Corporate Accountability Act, which is also known as the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. Again, this regulates the financial control of the corporate boards. And of course, like I said, this does not apply to nonprofit like SAMA, but it's good to learn from here because there's a number of provisions. One of them is a board oversight. And of course, the different committees that you have and then disclosure, very important, what documents to disclose. And then if there's any conflict of interest. And of course, document retention, very, very important. Most of our Muslim-run organizations, they have no idea about document retention. You're talking about even an email that, let's say if I send an email to you as a donor, that's a document that needs to be kept. But how long, when? So you have to have document retention policy. Of course, whistleblowers are very, very important, audit and conflict of interest. So this is the stuff that is good to know and then be prepared because the legal system in the United States is very, very complex and also very nasty, So you want to really avoid, the best you can do is just to prepare for it. So prevention is the best arsenal here that we can get from Enrons and other business failures. All right, so number 5, this is the first one. So what are the barriers to effective governance? Well, number 1, ineffective leadership. If you don't have the right leadership in the right position, then that's where you're failing, okay? And then, of course, representational mindset, everybody has their own baggage that they bring instead of, represent the organization, they have their own agenda. Of course, lack of sustained commitment to the vision, so you have to have the vision, mission, values, which everybody, I think is very straightforward. But again, do they have commitment to sustain those? Do they review them regularly? And see if there is there any checks and balances to see what they're doing on those ramification. All right, Next one is unclear definitions of function, roles, and responsibilities. This we talked about already. Again, so going back to bylaws, roles and responsibility. After that comes a lack of clarity between the role of management and then the board. This is a very common one in a lot of nonprofit, even non-Muslim as well. So it has to be clearly defined job description for every role, both the board and the CEO or executive director. And then last but not least, lack of mutual trust. If there's 10 board members, 10 of them, they have to trust each other. If there's one person does not trust the other, or another person or vice versa, then you have a problem. So it's going to be barrier to effective governance. All right. Let's see. All right. So let's go. Next one is, all right. And then another more information in terms of this is imbalance of skills and competencies. So the board members, they don't have the right skills and competencies. Let's, for example, if somebody is not a good speaker, don't make him a speaker of the organization. Bring somebody who can speak, who can present the organization, who can present the mission, who are, and I see this all the time, you know, it was a phase-based organization. Followed by that is poor information management. This could be both information coming to the organization and information leaving the organization. Could be from, you know, the weekly, you know, email that's sent or versus, you know, the yearly report that you do to donors and so forth. Of course, burnout is a very very common barrier to effective governance. But again, you could avoid the burnout by having clearly delineated roles and responsibilities, you know, of the board, and then the expectations that's been set for them. And then turnover is another barrier. And finally, this is very, very important, and I highly recommend Sama to look into this, lack of succession planning. Recently, I know we lost a great person, which I never knew about him, Dr. Abov, you know, but I started reading whatever information I can, and Sama has lost a great icon, a giant, really. And may Allah, you know, shower His mercy on him. And after his basically incident, that's what I really thought of, and led me to do what I'm doing right now, because I was so touched by people speaking about him so highly, and I really envied him. I said, I wish to be him, you know. And so again, lack of succession planning. This is very, very, people, they don't think for tomorrow, because we are here today, all of us, but we cannot guarantee we're going to be here the next 5 years, 6 years, 10 years. And definitely our Muslim brothers, this is, we really don't even think about succession planning. So it's good to have all this strategic planning and then to work accordingly for a successful organization. All right. And so what's an effective board? On the opposite, also they keep everything context in perspective, and they're composed of diverse group, which I really give kudos to Sama here. We have two sisters, you know, which I was very, very much to, you know, to know that the president is a female gender, and also our sister, and then of course the executive director, I guess, just to be. So this is very good. And now, of course, they make strategic decisions, not personal, and a long-term, you know, consistent with the mission of the organization. And then consistently, they communicate with one another. This communication also deals with electronic communication, texting, emails, you know, constantly. If you communicate constantly, you know exactly what's happening. So a board is like I said earlier, it's a team of individuals working together to achieve the biggest mission of the organization. And of course, they take an analytical approach to things, not you know, feeling, but again, analyzing the information that's coming and then working on it. And then finally, it's making sure that every member is well informed, you know, in terms of what's going on on a daily basis and weekly basis and monthly basis. All right, this brings us number 6, and then the documents. We already mentioned the bylaws is one of them. And again, here we're talking about what policies do you have, especially the distraction policies, you know, and then how long you're going to retain this information, or where you're going to, who's going to have them, where. This has to be really very clearly delineated. And of course, this is not only on the board, but also the staff, the volunteers, and then outsiders maintain and document the story. So it's very, very important to have the destruction policy. I'm assuming that SAMA has those policies in place. If not, it's not difficult to incorporate them as soon as possible. All right, and then in addition to those, the IRS, another entity that always look into behind a nonprofit, is that, you know, there's compliance guide that they publish that you need to be aware of. And then they recommend that the nonprofit, whether government are necessary to ensure the sound operations and compliance within the tax laws are very, very important. All right. All right, so does a nonprofit need a code of ethics, of value? Oh, definitely, the answer is yes. But the question is, so which one are you gonna state? Again, this is where the board decide at least 5 to 7, no more than 7, statement of values, and then defining them, and then, you know, and then acting on them. So this basically will be, you know, in order for the board, and also the in Sam's case will be the people who are donating, you know, to know that, you know, this is their values, and then they uphold to it, you know. And also this will be guides, you know, to making ethical choices like we talked about earlier, and then accountability becomes very, very important. All right. So these are the most common: honesty, integrity, transparency, confidentiality. You know, that everybody says, but again, in terms of how much honest you are, you know, and you know, the integrity here, and then transparency and confidentiality becomes very, very important. This brings out to number 7, which is, I think, is the last one. Practice. So the first one that I like to start is the corporate minutes or the meeting minutes. This has to be delineated, you know, all the time, the location, who attended, who even doesn't attend, with reason, without reason, and have to be approved by the board all the time, making sure that, because these are part of the documentation for good governance, because you can go back and see what happened in the meeting that happened in a yearly meeting, and then you can cross-check and review stuff. Annual review is very, very important. This is according to the IRS Form 990. This is a policy and questionnaire about conflict of interest, as I mentioned earlier. And then the minutes and the board of directors, as well as the policies invoked. So specifically, this is line number 2, the IRS Form 990. And then this form also has to be reviewed by every board member before it's filled, you know. Next one will be the approval of the CEO's compensation and benefits. These are very important. Also, if you have a CEO or executive director, and then how the board determines the compensation. Because usually they're not going to ask you. They are assuming that everybody read it. Once you sign it, then it becomes an official document. Hopefully, everything will be consistently to what you have said. Finally, again, like I said, the Form 990 has to be, you know, reviewed by every board member before it's filled, so that way you know exactly what the board is signing off. Okay. And of course, disclose to the public is the most recent, you know, financial returns. If the organization is young, of course, less than 3 years, this is not applicable. But of course, after 3 years, you have to have the most recent where people can look at it and review it and so forth. So these are the documentation for good governance. Once you start putting all this, enumerating and, you know, sharing the right information, then hopefully the organization will be in the good side of the legal aspect, also on your donors as well. According to Richard Chait from Harvard University, he gave some 7, you know, best practices for governance. He said the first best practice is focus. You allocate time and attention. It means attention to everything that you're doing as a board member. So if you're not doing that, then that will be something to look into. The structure, this is an organizational structure. Who is doing what? I think we mentioned earlier, you know, the president, the vice, whatever roles there is, the committee. So organizational structure becomes very important. And number 3, making meetings meaningful. You know, means like you have consensus agenda, everybody's come ready, everybody aware of what's going to be speaking, they come prepared, becomes meaningful, and they take decisions. Learning, we're always learning, you know, to make a 5-star organization, you have to learn every single day, you know. And and especially if you are, you know, in the board of directors for any nonprofit, you have to learn how, you know, nonprofit is run, the legal aspect, and the governance, the whole 9 yards. So you have to keep learning, because as information is changing, it's good information to update your knowledge. Deliberating, this is, you know, robust discussion. And by the way, and in any organization, all the board, they don't have to agree. They can disagree, but at the same time, at the end, they make a decision that's best for the organization, you know. And number 6, cohesiveness, building a team. Like I said, the board is a team of individuals working for the same mission. Finally, which is very, very important, accountability. This is ensuring due diligence on the work that you do. So I thought this was really great by Professor Chai that he shared with us. And I've seen this in many, in different seminars that I've attended through the years. All right, so if we have to bring this home, the core element, number 1, for any nonprofit will be that deliberately designs and fosters an environment that recognizes, affirms, and values diversity, which is very, very important, equity and inclusion, okay? So here could be not only in experience in terms of diversity, but also gender, which I think Sama is already showing to be the case, which is great. The second one is, you know, to place a high priority of recruiting and retain not staff only, but also board members, which are, you know, supportive and productive for an environment. And then core element number 3 will be to recognize that volunteers provide a critical connection, because most of nonprofit organizations are run by volunteers, but you have to have a clear sense of what is required of them, you know, between the organizations and then the committees, serving as a valuable advocate and public relations ambassadors, you know. And last one, core, you know, L number 4, the organization should have compliance with the local, state, and national, you know, again, this is employment law for the other employees, but also, as we spoke about, IRS and other regulatory bodies that to be aware of. All right, here I want to share with you just quickly in this slide, you know, I like this, every organization have a life cycle, okay? And if you can understand this, you know, in a bigger picture, it would be really nice. But it emerges, you know, as a startup, and then go through a growth, maturity, decline, and decay. So if you can really get the organization before it is reached over here, I have another slide I'm going to show you. Again, this is the time horizon in the x-axis. Let's see if I have another slide. Yeah, this one. All right, this is work by Dr. Susan Stevens, you know, Nonprofit Life Cycle Institute. She depicts very important. So the idea startup right here, everybody goes very quickly. The growth is where most people have difficulty, and the maturity. So if you can get right here before it regenerates the cycle, then you have a very well-to-do organization, and then hopefully it will continue to grow. Otherwise, it will regenerate and, of course, turn around and be very difficult, and then terminally you just fail, or the organization does not exist. So to get it here, and I recommend if you guys can read this book of Dr. Stevens, you know, or get a copy of it, just read the summary of it. So in conclusion, my friends, so good governance is all, number 1 is to follow the law. That's number 1. And you have to be efficient, you have to be accountable, we talk about that, transparent, responsive, consensus oriented, not my way or the highway, but everybody's, and then participatory, and then inclusive. So that's really, in a nutshell, what good governance is: having the proper bylaws updated and roles and responsibilities, you know, delineated every time. Here are resources that you can, you know, use. My favorite one is this Standard for Excellence Institute. I think they are in Baltimore, Maryland. Another one is American Institute of Philanthropy. So these organizations, they have good resources that Sama could use, of course, others as well. And there's another one here. Very good information. Basically, it's a good resource to be able to dive into and then get some information. I think this concludes our, yes, it does, So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.